Kicking off the list at number 10, Christine Everhart. We start in Iron Man 1, released back in 2008, the film that kicked off the MCU pretty much. We have Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, having a great time in Vegas, as most billionaires do. After being approached by Christine Everhart after winning his Apogee Award, she conducts an on-the-spot interview with Stark, asking about the nicknames that have come to light during his military weapon deals. Nicknames like Merchant of Death or the Da Vinci of our time. Stark responds in his usual confident, cocky manner, and at one point in the conversation, Christine asks him if he ever loses an hour of sleep while accumulating his riches. He responds with, "I'd be prepared to lose a few with you." And it works! This reporter ends up sleeping over at the Stark Malibu mansion and is greeted by Tony's future wife, Pepper Potts, where she refers to her as trash. Now, of course, the scene is to set the character for Stark, but Christine still wants to take him down. She's the only one left sitting after Tony announces that he is Iron Man at the end of the film. Number 9, Juggernaut and She-Hulk. Say what? Okay, this one's pretty interesting. So what happens when you get a super lawyer and a super criminal? Well, you get a night of romance for some reason. Uncanny X-Men issue 435. We see Juggernaut and he just kicks Rhino's ass. And then he has the perfect opportunity to escape the holding cell that he's currently held in. So Jen Walters, aka She-Hulk, asks him the pressing questions. Why the change of heart, Kane? You're a criminal. Why didn't you just leave? She thinks it's part of this master plan, this act of kindness, saving the guard from Rhino, and then willingly being detained again. She thinks it's a scam, rightfully so. So they start to talk about baseball a bit, you know, getting all casual, and then the final question. Jen goes, "What do you think about women's rights?" He smiles, she smiles, and then we get this glorious next shot. The shot where they're in bed, like the wall is broken, the nightstand's just on the ground, the lamp's messed up. The place has gone to shit. And the craziest part about all of this, the windows are just wide open. I mean, this whole thing ended up retconned so that She-Hulk was a doppelganger from an alternate Earth, but this is still pretty weird. Number 8, Black Widow and Spider-Man. We go now to Marvel Team Up issue 82, Spider-Man and the Black Widow. Now, at this point, Nancy Rushman has entered the chat. Black Widow looks like Black Widow, but inside here, it's actually Nancy Rushman, school teacher from upstate New York. Got it? Yep. Cool. The issue begins with Nancy outside when a couple of New York punks, try and steal her bag. Spider-Man, of course, swings in and saves the day. Mostly he starts the thugs off, and then Nancy delivers the final blow, saving Spider-Man back. Nice. He sees the Black Widow suit in her bag, but she doesn't even know what he's talking about. She is fully convinced that she is a school teacher and not, in fact, Black Widow. Spider-Man's like, "No, you just took that guy out. You're for sure Black Widow. Look at the suit." But still, nothing. So, Spider-Man offers her the suit of the Black Widow, to Nancy Rushman, in attempts to keep her warm, maybe bring some memories back in her head, find out what's going on. So Spider-Man sees her in the outfit and comments on how nice she looks. Real nice. So she gets the outfit on, and it of course fits perfectly. But this doesn't jog her memory. Despite how good the suit may feel, the memories just aren't coming back. And then in comes the S.H.I.E.L.D. strike force with the plans to shoot Black Widow, Spider-Man even getting grazed by a bullet in the process. Just then there's a moment where Nancy's body acts by itself almost, and then she lunges forward and strikes the strike force member and takes him down with ease. She's of course still confused, and they end up sticking together for a bit, and then in issue 84, Nancy goes in for the kiss, and Spider-Man has no idea what to do. He likes Widow, but this Widow lookalike doesn't act like her, so it's a weird thing, and in Spider-Man's words, these are the wrong feelings in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah, you could definitely say that again. She ended up getting her memory back, and the real Black Widow wasn't as into the web slinger as he hoped for. Poor Peter Parker. Number 7, Deathpool. Deadpool is on this list, of course, and it's for good reason. One of the crazy relationships that he's been in was one with death. Now, with Deadpool dying as often as he does, he of course has seen the face of death, and he's a fan. In Deadpool The End, we find Deadpool finally getting close to death, long term. Finally. Even when Mephisto pipes in, Deadpool responds with, "Can at dollar store Devilman crybaby. I've been angling this hookup for like a century to get here. And the top priority for Wade? To get to the ever-lovin' after ever-livin' Nookie." While Thanos is normally the one who's been Death's boy toy, it's nice to see a comic where Wade finally gets that relationship. And it's super hilarious and of course, super sexual. A lot of innuendos in that one, check it out. Number 6, Iron Man. The stud has for sure had a few hookups in his day, but one of the most wild one-night stands has to be from Iron Man 3. We start the movie in a flashback to New Year's Eve of 1999. We have Tony, again before he's a superhero, so he's just super rich and cocky, and of course uses those skills to persuade the scientist, Maya Hansen. Stark actually bailed on his meeting with Aldrich Killian for this night with Hansen, and of course Killian's character arc began this night being upset at Tony for giving him the cold shoulder. The next morning, Maya wakes up to no Tony beside her, rather a note. And those two ended up being the masterminds behind Project Extremis, which of course caused a lot of trouble. And it all came down to that one fateful New Year's Eve back in 1999. Not a good call. Not a good call, Tony. Number 5, Howard the Duck. Our boy Howard the Duck was in the final lineup for Avengers Endgame. Check it out. So of course I gotta talk about his love life too. In one scene in the movie Howard the Duck, Howard gets close to the singer Beverly Switzer, like in bed close, real close. Now we might not see this exact scene in future Marvel movies, I mean I hope we do. Could you imagine if they did? I mean it's one thing for two soups to jump in the sack, but Howard the Duck, he's a duck. Too weird for me and my friends, too weird, I don't know about this one. But if you want to see what Howard the Duck is all about in full force, for sure watch his movie. It's a classic 80s flick. It just got the whole 80s thing. Got Michael J. Fox in there. It's great. And also the practical effects for Howard the Duck make this cute scene extra creepy. It just doesn't look very comforting. And number 4, Spider-Man and Black Cat. Peter Parker, of course, is the web-slinging friendly neighborhood hero and does what he can do to keep the people of New York safe. The little people. But underneath all of that, he's still just a young dude. And it's one thing to have a recurring villain, somebody that matches the hero's abilities, you know? Usually the villain will end up having a similar story, so that the hero and villain relationship is kind of even, right? So when it comes to Black Cat, she of course has been caught by Spider-Man many times, being a cat burglar and him being Spider-Man. They will definitely jump into each other. They have this weird relationship, but it's super interesting. Like he's a hero, she's a criminal. I'm actually still waiting to see a proper Black Cat Spider-Man dynamic on the big screen. They're close. They're very close to getting him. He even told her his real name. So Black Cat, aka Felicia, was a cat burglar just like her dad. But after she dates Spider-Man, she starts to become the good guy, and it's awesome. She's always fascinated me as a character. This relationship, even in Spider-Man PS4, their relationship and how they work together causes some raised eyebrows with MJ. Peter's like, yeah, me and Black Cat are doing this cool DLC mission together. And she's like, oh yeah, cool. Be back before 11. Have fun with Black Cat, the lady who might be the mother of your kid. Also, you might have a kid, so that's neat. Cool, I'm gonna go watch The Goonies on Blu-ray. See ya tomorrow, I guess. God, my life sucks. We were on our way to seeing this relationship form in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, we were introduced to Felicia, played by Felicity Jones. In that same movie, Gwen Stacy bit the dust. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 would have set this relationship up so nicely, but it never happened. Bye, Felicia. And number 3, Wolverine. A lot of people overlooked this moment from X-Men Days of Future Past, but it's actually a great example of who Logan is deep down. In Days of Future Past, Logan's mind was sent back in time to 1973. That's a while back, so he can prevent Mystique from killing Trask. Now, the second he wakes up in this past, it's meant to be a comedic moment. He's in a room that's decked out in 70s gear, and he wakes up next to a woman in a waterbed. A waterbed? I don't know how anybody could sleep in those things. Imagine having a few drinks and then laying in a waterbed. Oh my God, I threw up so quick. But he wakes up next to a mobster's daughter. He was being paid to keep her safe, so of course he runs into a bit of trouble, having to kill the mobsters that enter that room because they of course found them both together. Not professional at all, Logan, not professional at all. Also, if he just kept his distance, those poor mobsters would still be alive. They have families, they probably have bills to pay. And number 2, Peter Quill. Guardians of the Galaxy came out in 2014 and James Gunn made the most fun Marvel movie to date. Still, the most fun Marvel movie ever. The opening of the film, we find Chris Pratt's character, Star-Lord, and as the opening credits roll, we see him walking, well, dancing rather, to find the orb, which ends up being an Infinity Stone. It's a pretty important orb. So he goes in, introduces himself, does the badass fight moves, and then rockets his way out of there. And after he barely escapes in his ship, the Milano, as soon as his ship starts to fly away from danger, out pops an alien woman from below deck. So we briefly meet Berit, and if you don't remember her from the first movie, that's fine, because neither did Star-Lord. In fact, he didn't even remember she was on the ship. I mean, of all the times to have a one-night stand with an alien, right before a big heist, this guy's crazy. Come on, Quill. And finally, number 1. Ant-Man and Beetle. Now, of course, whenever I read issues with Ant-Man now, I see it as Paul Rudd. Naturally, I mean, he's so lovable and charming, of course. Paul Rudd lives rent-free in a lot of our heads. guaranteed. I think to myself, what would Paul Rudd do at least twice a day? We gotta talk about it more. Paul Rudd was cast to play Ant-Man in his first MCU debut, of course, back in 2015 in Ant-Man. He plays Scott Lang in the movies because I think people aren't really too fond of Hank Pym. Good idea. So when I read the issue with Scott Lang's Ant-Man and Beetle, I was sitting up. I was like, yeah, this is Paul Rudd. He even wrote it in a way where it's like really comedic and the timing between the shots, it's amazing. Heroes and villains hooking up, that should be a show. Screw The Bachelor in Paradise, what is that? I want to see the good and the bad doing the ugly. Every Thursday at 9 p.m, that's when I want to see it. Right before Friday, so we all come in the office and we're like, see who Ant-Man hooked up with? It's like, yeah dude, awesome, unreal. I want it. In Ant-Man Last Days issue 1, we find Scott Lang as he bumps into Beetle at a club. Ant-Man's like, whoa, you tried to kill Iron Man. You're gonna go to the authorities, madam. And she's like, Scott, relax, that was like 3 weeks ago. Hashtag old news. So they start talking, Scott buys her a drink, and then Scott tells her something Cap said. If you want to be an Avenger, you do not sleep with supervillains. And then this is the next page showing Ant-Man just sitting in boxers in bed with Beetle, with the line, I'm so sorry Captain America, which I can just hear in Paul Rudd's voice. Like it's so funny. And also his damn helmet is still on. He just looks so silly. He's got like a 12 pack and he's just sitting there with his helmet and he's like, oh, what a crazy night. And then Beetle wakes up and says, oh, you're still here? That's weird. Weird is the perfect word for it, Beetle. Number 10, Mystique and Deadpool. Deadpool gets around, and so does Mystique, in fact. So it's only fair to assume that the two ended up crossing paths at some point. In holy matrimony even? Maybe. So in Deadpool number 27, titled The Wedding of Deadpool, we find out that Mystique and Wade were married. That would be the best wedding of all time. Well, the love wasn't true or strong enough to last, as shortly after he asked her to sign the divorce papers. He's also been married quite a bit, so this isn't his first divorce rodeo, that's for sure. So why didn't the couple work out? Well, Mystique, being Mystique, was actually just using Wade, sort of like a way into Weapon X, so she can steal some files. Classic Mystique move. The issue itself is quite enjoyable and funny. We even see Wade visit the lovely Niagara Falls. Maybe he goes over in a barrel, I'll never tell. Number 9, Winter Soldier and Black Widow. This is one that audience members have talked about seeing for a while on the big screen, like they want this. If the MCU had worked so that Bucky and the Avengers got more time to hang out, this might have ended up happening. I could see it. I think there's more to Natasha and Bucky, because in the comics, Bucky trains Nat in the Red Room. And then in the MCU, Natasha talks to Steve about the Winter Soldier and how she's tried to stop him before. So she knows about his existence in that universe, just how much we don't really know yet. But with Black Widow being a prequel to Iron Man 2, I feel like we're gonna see some sort of flashbacks or something that involves Bucky. I think it's going to be full of cameos. Natasha was given this serum in her origins, of course, and I hope they include this in the movie where she ages slower. So her and Bucky are around the same age in the comics, funny enough. And she knows him as James back in the day, you know, before the Winter Soldier stuff. So could the comic book hookup just be a one-time thing? Or will we see some sort of flirtatious behavior with the two in her solo flick and some saucy flashback scene? Let us know below. Do you want to see this? Is this kind of like a weird thing? I know people want Bucky and Cap to be like a thing. We were all rooting for it, but hey, it's never too late. Number 8, Happy and Pepper. Yeah, I just said that. This one would never happen in the MCU, but just imagining it is pretty hilarious and weird. So yeah, in the comics, they were a thing. There was this sort of love triangle actually that happened going on with Pepper, Tony, and Happy. So once Happy was hired as Tony's new bodyguard, Happy and Pepper started to bicker, kind of argue a little bit, and through that they ended up becoming pretty flirty in nature. Kind of like in high school when somebody makes fun of you, it's because they usually end up liking you a bit in the first place, you know, it's like playful banter. So Pepper and Happy ended up getting married. That is until Happy met his demise in the Civil War storyline. Sads. I honestly feel like Happy and Aunt May are gonna do this whole marriage thing in the MCU. Like this is gonna happen to them. Like by the time that happens, Peter will probably end up running the Avengers. So I'm sure he'll take the spot of Tony when it comes to commenting on the weird relationship between the two. Only I'm sure it will be more lighthearted and fun in nature. Kind of like what we saw with him in Far From Home. Solid dynamic, I'm here for the both of them. Or maybe Spider-Man is gonna get pissed once Happy dies and that's gonna be like his way of like coming back in. Or maybe Aunt May will die and then he'll be even more pissed. Oh my god, we have a lot of things to work with. Number 7, Nightcrawler and Jermaine. This one is juicy. Imagine you're dating somebody and then you find out that they're actually an adopted sibling. Like, that's a weird conversation to have. I mean, you're not related, sure, but like, That's still weird. That's a very weird thing to do. That's exactly what happened to Kurt Wagner. Kurt grew up with Jermaine Sardos. He was adopted by her and her mother, and they of course became close, being the new siblings and all. But then things get amazing, okay? So Kurt started to date a woman named Amanda Sefton, okay? And then she turned out to be Jermaine in disguise. Surprise, dude, that's crazy. Now, normally when you find something like this out, you're a little upset. You've been deceived. You're obviously confused, and you're probably pretty angry. I mean, one would assume. But Nightcrawler is totally cool with it. He's like, you know what? I'd be more demonstrative about it, but I don't want to set a bad example for Kitty Pryde. Yeah, or you could respond like that. That's one way you could come back. This dude is not fazed by this at all. He's like, yeah man, I basically have 2 girlfriends. What's up? Number 6, Kitty and Colossus. Age is just a number, I guess. When it comes to Marvel romances, they aren't really the most healthy of romances, you know? When the two first met in X-Men issue 129, she's said to be 13 years old. They're trying to recruit her to go to Professor X's school. Colossus is like 18 at the time, or so we think. Now, in the Days of Future Past storyline beginning in X-Men 141, we see Kitty and Colossus married in the future. Nice, I think. That's another thing though, like back to the 14-year-old part, because that's the craziest point that I'm trying to make here. They had their first kiss during the space mission, and right before they kiss, Kitty is even like, oh, I wish I was older, and Colossus is like, so do I. And then he explains how serious he's being by kissing her. And cue the police, send them in guys. We got him, roll it down, let's go. And then after the kiss, he's like, oh, you're not older, like you should be older. And Kitty's like, it doesn't matter. He's like, no, it for sure does matter. I'm like, yeah, you just kissed though. It kind of feel like you're already nailing that confident, buddy. Yeah, this isn't the right time or place. More so, time. That's a big time, that 4-letter word. That's the main thing here. Number 5, Wolverine and Squirrel Girl. Yeah, this one's weird. So in part 1 of this list, I had mentioned that Wolverine, when he was with a young Mary Jane Watson, which is just a wild time. If you haven't seen part 1, you gotta go watch it. It has some fun stuff in there. Turns out he has this weird history as well with Squirrel Girl. And this has been speculated for a while now, and it comes down to a simple page of text. In New Avengers issue 7, we see the two talking as if something had happened. Something rather intimate, that is. A little intimate. Squirrel Girl is like, well, I hope we can agree to be professional, you know? And Wolverine's like, of course. You look amazing. And she's like, oh, you do look good too. There's just something there. This is not a conversation, like I don't catch up with my buddies and be like, hey, how's school? Good, you look amazing. You do too. I'm like, yeah, let's be professional. They're like, oh, what? Why wouldn't you? This is a normal thing. This becomes more evident come Wolverine issue 8. Emma Frost had entered Wolverine's mind and literally found a room called Sexual Fantasies. And then Emma's like, I know I'm gonna regret going into this one. And maybe she was right, because upon opening the door, none other than Squirrel Girl herself is hanging out in this room. Proof? I don't know, proof of a weird fling? I think so. Number 4, Wolverine and Storm. Now, whenever Wolverine is in the picture, you know somebody's gonna get hurt, whether it's physically or emotionally. So Storm and Wolverine were always flirtatious. They were the cool kids of the X-Men. They didn't exactly get involved with a lot of the drama. They were too cool for that, you know? Besides, Wolverine was too into Jean Grey anyway, so his hands were full. Now, after a divorce, that's a tricky time to do stuff. Even flirting with a coworker after a divorce, it just looks way worse now more than anything. The timing is just ill. Storm divorced Black Panther and then things got interesting. The two of them ran the Jean Grey school and hit it off. Now, the two of them could have just gone on to become the best of lovers, but Wolverine had to go ahead and die, not giving the relationship the proper light of day. And number 3, Gamora and Iron Man. Now, at the start of Endgame, we see Tony Stark and Nebula stranded in space after the events of Infinity War. The two weirdly got along. I mean, yeah, they both bonded over losing a massive battle that resulted in lots of their family and friends dying, so it's kind of easy to let bygones be bygones, you know? Tony and the daughter of Thanos in one ship playing games, you gotta love it. Now, what if I told you that this isn't the first time Tony has gotten close to one of these mad sisters? Tony and Gamora, believe it or not, have hooked up before. So the panel starts with Gamora being all shy and cool. She has like her drink and she's like, oh, you're gonna have to do better out here. And then Tony responds in his classic Tony Stark manner, I can do better. And then it immediately cuts over to the next page of both of them lying in bed. He's all tucked into the blanket, like the shell head looks like he's shell shocked, to say the least. And then Gamora's chill about it. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna go back to the bar. And Tony's like, alright, cool. And then after she leaves, he lets out a small, ow, which, pretty obvious. Number 2, Scott Summers and Emma Frost. We've all been in class and maybe you see your high school crush on the other side of the room. You start to daydream, maybe you're putting your pencil through your hair, doing all that cute and you start to daydream of talking to them, maybe even dating them. You can't help it, right? All those hormones flying around through your high school head. High school's wild, man, what a weird time. Cyclops loves the telepathic types, so this exact scenario could get him in quite the pickle if he did anything like this, which he did. So after Emma becomes Scott's therapist to say, some things get heated. So she used her telepathic powers to enter Scott's mind to help him get through past traumas, you know? What a good friend. So naturally they get pretty close, maybe a bit too close. The affair happened in their minds, which is why this is one of my favorites on this list. Like Jean Grey walked in on them in their/her minds, all the minds together. Superheroes are insane, man. So Emma Frost pitches the situation pretty well. She's like, no, we'll be in deep private thought where it's safe to explore these feelings without guilt. And he's like, Emma, I'm clearly betraying my wife, come on, get out of my head. I don't know, I feel like with the psychic stuff, that's like, does it count? Is that cheating? Yeah, that's cheating. If you think about it. I don't know, what a weird loophole. And finally, number 1. WandaVision. Yep, with the new Disney Plus show getting released soon, I have to save this one for last. This one is hot out of the MCU and I feel like it's a relationship that people overlook. Now I'm talking about the MCU story with these two characters, that's it. These guys should not be together. Like, what? During Civil War, she buries this dude underground when he attacks Hawkeye. Vision also is made out of the Mind Stone mostly, so the same stone that gave Wanda and Pietro their powers in this universe. And maybe that's why they're attracted to each other, but like that's not enough. That's still, like they're sexually involved. Like they, you know, it's weird. The fact that they ended up together at all during any of these storylines, like how do you have the time for relationships? Like from Age of Ultron up until Infinity War, there's like no chance or time to hit this off properly. Like that's the biggest red flag couple. And sure, this last one is just my opinion, but I feel like I'm not alone here. The romance started somewhere between Civil War and Infinity War, but like what we see on the screen isn't enough to make us believe that they're like a solid, happy, healthy couple. It just doesn't make any sense. Kicking off the list at number 10, Black Widow and Tony Stark. Yeah man, I'm starting the list off with a wild one. So in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, they get a little close. Closer than the MCU relationship, that's for sure. So Ultimate issue 3 opens with this shot. And the shot is all of the Ultimates just hanging out in Tony's mansion. And then there's a sex tape playing in the background, and that sex tape being Iron Man and Black Widow. So what's the deal? Why does this exist? Well, in the Ultimates 2, her and Iron Man dated and even got engaged. But it's all lies. Lies, I tell ya. She was trying to destroy the Avengers for the fall of the Soviet Union. That was like her payback. That is, until she's killed by, you guessed it, Hawkeye. Nope, you didn't guess that, because that would be crazy. Imagine if this is how she went out in Avengers Endgame. That scene with her and Hawkeye could have been a bit more wild, and maybe a bit more emotional. Just kidding. That gets me every time. So after she's dead, the tape gets released. People are selling DVDs on the streets about it. Hey, hot dog, no, what about Iron Man and Black Widow bumping uglies? What do you say? New York, New York. I don't know. I like taking risks. I like doing New York accents. Number 9, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Yep, I said what I said. Again, from the Ultimate Universe, Earth 1610 to be specific, the siblings are pretty close, naturally. In Avengers Age of Ultron, the two go from being villains to eventually becoming Avengers by the end of the film. And when Hawkeye said to Wanda, "You're an Avenger now," I exhaled loudly. That was awesome. I had my big 3D glasses on. I look like a scuba diver. I'm just sitting there like, yes, awesome. And then Quicksilver died saving Hawkeye. Again with the goggles. I was like, no, yes, and then no. So change is inevitable and can happen quite fast. The two got a little too close though in the Ultimates. Again, this Ultimate series is quite risque, if I can say that. So sure, this was an alternate version or whatever, but you can't unsee some stuff. In the 3rd issue of the Ultimates, the Wasp is like, man, they sure do love each other. And Cap's like, yeah, of course they do. They're family. Why was he so mad that I commented on her outfit? That's weird. And then the Wasp is like, dude, like he loves her, like, you know, loves her. And then Cap gives the funniest facial expression and goes, but yeah, we all said that, man. We all made the same face, my dude. Number 8, Professor X and Moira MacTaggert. So as we saw in the X-Men movies, they're pretty lovey-dovey and they've got a nerdy, cute relationship going. James McAvoy, Rose Byrne, they're unreal actors. It was super enjoyable to watch them. Now in the movies, he makes her forget a bunch of stuff for good reason, right? It even adds to their dynamic a bit because after, he's obviously still into her and she's like, hey, nice to meet you for the first time ever. Never met this guy before. It's a pretty sad situation, but cute nonetheless. But it could have been way worse. See, in the comics, he at one point straight up abandons Moira and their child to go after his own dreams. Dude's a real go-getter. More like a go leave her. Yeah, I'm gonna leave, sorry. Number 7, Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. What the f? Yeah, you heard me, folks. Beginning in The Amazing Spider-Man number 509, this one is quite odd, to say the least. So Peter gets this letter, right? And the letter that is supposedly from Gwen Stacy, although she's dead. So Peter does a little detective work and runs some DNA tests on the letter. He comes to find out that Gwen Stacy had actually secretly given birth to twins. Mary Jane finally ends up filling Peter in on this dark secret. Gwen Stacy had a secret affair with Norman Osborn 7 months before she died. What's the opposite of air horns? I feel like that's what should be playing loudly right now. Mary Jane even had a conversation with Norman about it. She said she doesn't want Norman to take care of the kids or else they're just gonna turn into another Harry Osborn. Pretty solid line. Norman's exposure to the Green Goblin formula caused these kids to be born early and they came out fully grown. Ouch. Number 6, Deadpool and SIRYN. Wade Wilson? In love? Sign me up. So, when the unlikely lovers were battling it out with Black Tom Cassidy and Juggernaut, Banshee was like, look girl, he's insane, he's a murderer, he's a madman, I tell ya. Warpath was eyeing her down, but she just couldn't help it but flirt with Wade Wilson. I mean, can you blame her? If I met Ryan Reynolds, I'd probably flirt. I'd be like, hey man, I love Aviation Gin, drink it every morning. What? SIRYN saw past all of that and she even overlooked his ugly appearance. What a gem. So this is pretty nice and Deadpool likes it. He feels happy almost. Huh. Deadpool says over time that she became the voice of reason and sanity in his head. So the two had a deal. She would still see him as long as he behaved. Warpath though, he wasn't a big fan. But who cares? Love is in the air. Number 5, Wolverine and MJ. Ultimate, guys. Ultimate, yet again. So, after Ultimate Spider-Man issue 66, Wolverine is a total creep. Now, that may not come as a total shock, but here are the facts. Wolverine and Spider-Man switched bodies, like the change-up, or I guess Freaky Friday would have been a better example. Mesmero switched their bodies, so Peter was like, hey man, I really need you to go to school. Like, we're 15, we kinda gotta go to school. While Wolverine was in Peter's body, he at one point ended up kissing MJ and even tried to sleep with her. Dude, huh? Yeah, I guess those walks to school with her made him realize how awesome she was. MJ told him she wants to wait until they're older for that kind of thing though. So thank the Lord, nothing like that happened. But there was a kiss. Number 4, Black Widow and the Hulk. This next one is for the fans out there that aren't too heavily into comic books. So in the first Avengers film, we get our first look at Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. This happens moments before the Hulk tries to take out Natasha, aka Black Widow. So that's the first interaction with the pair. That's a pretty rocky start. Even when Nat tries to recruit Banner, he's not too fond of the idea at all, as normal Banner. And then by the time we get to Avengers Age of Ultron, we hear Stark say the words, "You and Banner better not be playing hide the zucchini" to Natasha, which for starters, is an amazing line. No idea how that made the final cut of the movie. Secondly, this is a nice confirmation that Banner and Nat are hooking up. You even see some on-screen romance when they're at Hawkeye's secret Farmville house, you know? The most notable part of the relationship is that Natasha can get the Hulk to revert back to Bruce by touching her hands to his. She's like, hey big guy, sun's getting real low. And it works like a charm. And Nat gives her trademark smirk as he cools down in the forest. It's not an easy task to do either. I mean, Thor tried to do it in Thor Ragnarok, but I mean, we all know how that ended up. Number 3, Magneto and the Wasp. We all love Magneto, I mean, it's kinda hard not to. In Secret Wars 1, issue 3, the pair actually have a one-night stand. Ew. So, she even said that Magneto is a great kisser. I mean, look at him, he's got the hair, he seems confident. So here's the kicker, Magneto was apparently drugged. Yeah, it was revealed from Jim Shooter, the guy who wrote the series. He said that Magneto was accidentally drugged, so he was all extra lovey-dovey, and that was of course a factor. So Magneto was head over heels for the Wasp, not really one to hook up and then bounce, you know? Like, he actually really liked her. But the Wasp, on the other hand, was like, yeah dude, that was a one-time thing. Michael Fassbender and Evangeline Lilly, honestly, I'm here for it. She's got the sass and he's got the, well, sad face, so, you know. It would work out. Number 2, Captain America and Sharon Carter. Okay, I have to include this one because when I saw this for the first time in theaters, we all went nuts. So I of course will see movie premieres, like as soon as the movies come out, I'm there, right? Middle row, I got my glasses on, I'm there an hour early. I don't drink water all day, I'm just trying not to go to the washroom. This is it, this is my goal. Because 1, I want to see the movie as soon as possible, and 2, I love hearing other people have the same reaction as me at the same time. So when we meet Sharon Carter and Captain America, it's revealed that Peggy Carter was her aunt, and she wasn't just an ordinary neighbor to Steve Rogers. So this dude must love the Carters or something. I mean, he goes from Peggy Carter to her niece, Sharon Carter, and then by the time Endgame rolls around, he goes back in time to the young Peggy Carter. Like, imagine that conversation in Endgame. So Steve, what have you been up to? I'm looking forward to seeing more of Sharon Carter as Agent 13. Emily Van Camp is an amazing actor, and apparently her character was on the run during Infinity War and Endgame. So I wonder what she was up to. Sneaky. And for number 1, finally, we got Thor and She-Hulk. The strongest couple ever? I think so. It's confirmed in Empire Fallout Fantastic Four #1 that it started off pretty calm and cool, and then the two heroes shared a kiss in the middle of a battlefield, because of course that's where most people end up kissing, and their first date ended up happening in Savage Land. #Savage. So Susan Storm straight up asked Thor if the two of them were a thing, and Shy Thor answered, verily. Also, Shy Thor, how cute. Imagine Chris Hemsworth like, yeah, I don't know, maybe. We could be, who knows, what's it to you? I don't know how to do Chris Hemsworth voice. I mean, the guy must have 2 hammers. People think that in the MCU, Thor and Captain Marvel will end up together, solely off that one look that they gave each other in Endgame. But my argument is that during that scene, you can slightly hear the words, I have telepathy. It's like, I have telepathy. It's pretty on point. But it's in Brie Larson's voice, obviously, I can't do that voice. So I'm assuming the two of them had a quick conversation or shared some type of knowledge between each other, either off screen or in their head. What do you guys think? Who's the perfect other half for the God of Thunder? Is it Jennifer Walters or Carol Danvers? You already know my vote, I don't know.
Number 10, Captain Marvel. I can't deny, I actually kinda like this ship, but it still feels pretty out of left field, especially if you're more of a cinematic Marvel fan, and that's where a lot of your knowledge comes from. And even if you're not, while there has been quite a bit of flirting between the two in the comics, I would have never expected either hero to actually act on those flirtations and possible feelings. Anyways, Carol basically had a bit of a crush on Spidey, which has come up multiple times in the past, and both were close friends due to their time working side by side on the Avengers. While Carol herself tends to be a bit more serious and Peter is a bit more silly, the two have some pretty adorable interactions, and they also have a lot of strong mutual respect, which is what it's all about when it comes to romance, baby. They went on a date back when Carol was still operating under her Miss Marvel mantle, but her crush has also come up a few times since then. Spider-Man bartered to get that initial date with her in exchange for basically his superhero help. The date was awkward, but it ended on a not so bad note when both heroes kinda realized they were just working way too hard to impress the other person, instead of just being themselves. Which is also what romance should be all about, just being yourselves. Also, I like that I did this when I was talking about people having mutual respect. Like, this is fighting. I don't know why I did this, but you know, mutual respect. So we did see them go on that one date, however, we have not seen them date since, even though it went pretty well by the end of it. Number 9, Deadpool. Okay, so this one isn't an official romance, more of a bromance, but it's shipped enough by people that we could consider it a fan-based pseudo-romance, which, yeah, is a thing I just made up now, so that's a thing now. Fan-based pseudo-romances. That's a term. Basically, Deadpool is borderline in love and obsessed with Spider-Man. It's pretty one-sided for the most part, but the two do have their moments, and there are times when Deadpool even inspires Spider-Man, or at least makes Peter consider Deadpool's maybe not as terrible and as annoying as he originally thought. The two have helped each other out multiple times and even have a whole team-up series together, and it lasted 3 years. It's pretty bromantic. Number 8. Mary Jane Watson. For this Spider-Man, we're not talking about Peter Parker, obviously. I'm not trying to argue that their relationship is weird because, you know, it's been going on for a long time. Although at times, that relationship between Peter Parker and MJ definitely can be weird, I would argue. I'm actually talking about here the relationship between the Scarlet Spider and Mary Jane Watson, Ben Reilly, who for a time was also known as Spider-Man. While we don't actually see how their romance plays out in the alternate world belonging to Universe X, it is implied that the two had a daughter together there who grows up to become Spider-Girl. It's never explained how this came about, but the idea of Mary Jane ending up and settling down with Ben Reilly makes me wonder what happened to Peter in this alternate universe. Or is it possible that initially Mary Jane thought this was Peter, with Ben being himself a clone of Parker? I have so many questions. Number 7. Ultimate Katie Bishop. This weird romance belongs to the Spider-Man known as Miles Morales. What's the deal with this relationship? Well, in the Ultimate Universe of 1610, Kate Bishop is not like the one we have in Earth 616. She isn't Hawkeye's apprentice, nor does she become Hawkeye in this reality. Instead, we learn she is dating Miles Morales and is just a normal student. Or so it seems. In reality, her parents are Hydra agents who sedate Miles when he visits and then kidnap him and experiment on him, alongside Dr. Doom. Ultimate Dr. Doom. Fortunately, he does manage to escape and of course decides to break up with Katie before leaving. Gotta love those extreme ultimate romances. So weird. I also like that Miles was like, yeah, so you guys like kidnapped me and experimented on me, so I think I'm just gonna like break up? I think I'm just gonna break up with you, but this was weird. Thanks. It's like a weird way to end your relationship. Number 6. Jackpot. With Jackpot, it's all pretty confusing because we have Sarah Earhart, the real superpowered Jackpot, and Alana Jobson, who is posing as Jackpot and uses drugs to give herself powers so she can become a hero. Here we are mostly talking about Alana Jobson. Alana Jobson, who is posing as Jackpot. While Alana herself is implied as being attracted to Sarah, when posing as Jackpot and fighting alongside Spider-Man, he initially thinks that she might be his ex-girlfriend Mary Jane. The two of them have a few flirty moments while fighting together. Jackpot even calls him Tiger, considering the name of her character is obviously meant to be a play on Mary Jane's famous catchphrase, "You just hit the jackpot, Tiger." This is also what compels Spider-Man to want to learn more about the new superhero. In reality, Alana Jobson is paying Sarah to use her superhero identity and registration papers, because she just really wants to be a hero. She ends up dying as a result of this desire when the superpower-inducing drugs and hormones she uses together end up killing her when mixed with a blindness serum, despite Spider-Man successfully giving her the antidote to said serum. This romance never really goes anywhere, it just ends in tragedy. Number 6. Emma Frost. This one is pretty strange, but it's also coming at us from an alternate reality, so you know, you kinda just gotta go with it. I think what really shocked me about it though is that Kitty Pryde and Peter Parker were also known to date in the Ultimate Universe, and so I've always kind of thought of Kitty as being, you know, quite younger than Emma, and that was the thing that made me go like, wait, what? So how old? What's happening? So I was just confused in general by that logic, although this is comics, so while in some realities characters may have a greater age gap, in others they may actually be the exact same age, closing that gap completely. And in this comic, that is what is happening. In Marvel Adventures Spider-Man, which takes place in the alternate reality of Earth 20051, both Emma Frost and her BFF Shat Sandoval had a crush on Spidey, and Emma Frost is the same age as him here, so it's not weird. It's a little weird, but it's not weird. Emma, being a telepath, used her powers to uncover his secret identity, and she causes a bit of trouble when Chad and Peter start dating. Eventually, her trickery, however, is exposed, and she's forced to face the consequences of her actions. Here, Emma Frost is known by the codename Silencer, and ends up becoming an ally to both Chad and Spider-Man later on. Number 4. Black Widow. The strange thing is, while this happened in Marvel Team Up issue number 82, as a quick little thing, when Black Widow loses her memory temporarily, it also has been a comic ship in an alternate world where there is an amalgam alternate version of Black Widow who is basically a blend of both Black Widow and Black Cat, which yes, is one of the coolest alternates for both Black Cat and Black Widow. I know, it's pretty great. The issue where these two, however, initially hook up comes to us from way back before that. How it ends up happening is Spider-Man saves the day for Black Widow, who at the time believes she is a school teacher named Nancy Rushman. The other weird thing is that Natasha has also lost her memories of who she is, but has managed to retain her fighting know-how, and also assists Spider-Man with apprehending criminals, not thinking that it is weird at all for her to be doing. But, you know, I guess the fighting know-how maybe is in her physical memory? I don't know how that all works, but brains, stuff, wiring. Physical memory? Spider-Man recognizes her and recognizes that her being enamored with him is admittedly pretty weird, as is the fact that she thinks she is a woman named Nancy Rushman when she's not. Once her memories are back, Black Widow is over the flirtation and basically just dips at the end of the issue. She's like, this was cool, but also not into you. Bye. Only me as Nancy Rushman was into you, Spider-Man, sorry about that. Number 3. Spider-Woman. While this isn't an official thing that has happened as of yet, we have gotten quite a few flirty moments between Spider-Man and Jessica Drew from Brian Michael Bendis' run on the Avengers. They weren't full-on shipped, but there was definitely some suggestive light shipping happening there. At one point when they are teamed up, Jessica even scans Spider-Man to make sure he's not a Skrull, just because she finds him to be so strange. His response was to ask if they were on a date. I guess he's just used to women calling him weird on dates, which kind of makes sense because Peter Parker is pretty awkward and weird. Fair enough. Number 2. Silk. One of the strangest romances that Peter has ever had is with another one of the Spider folks, Silk, Cindy Moon. Apparently they were both bit by the same radioactive spider, which is why they believe they are so irresistibly infatuated with one another. Either that or they just are inexplicably attracted to each other. The whole fact that they don't seem to have control of their physical urge to be together makes this relationship one of the weirdest that Peter has ever had, and kind of one of the most uncomfortable in my opinion, especially as even when they're in danger they just feel the urge to just get physical instead of, you know, dealing with the problem at hand. Like, their attraction to one another not only seems to be completely uncontrollable, but it can also potentially endanger innocent lives, or their own lives even. Number 1. Marrow. Yep, probably one of the weirdest relationships that's happened out there for Peter Parker. There was a random time that he briefly dated Marrow. Why? Well, I don't know, cause comics. These two dated very briefly and even had a team-up one-shot titled Spider-Man Marrow in the early 2000s, which delved into their brief relationship and Marrow's change in personality. Their relationship ended after Marrow realized she wasn't really herself, as she was being brainwashed and used by S.H.I.E.L.D. to hunt down life model decoys. After she regained her memories, she escaped S.H.I.E.L.D., but the two ultimately broke up because, yeah, I mean, she hadn't quite been herself basically throughout their relationship, so that'll do it. Oh, also she was a student at ESU where Peter was guest lecturing as a grad student, and Sarah refers to him multiple times in this issue as Mr. Parker, which I cannot deny I found quite a bit creepy. If you're calling your partner Mr. something, I don't know about that. Seems weird. Maybe that's just me. Number 10. Candace Nelson. That time when Daredevil very briefly dated Foggy Nelson's sister. Oh yeah, Foggy has a sister. Apparently this happened so quickly it's basically the smallest blip on Daredevil's love line, I'm sure, when it comes to Palm ratings. Candace is Foggy Nelson's younger sister who is studying journalism at ESU and ended up doing some snooping and attempted to expose the government and university for some involvement in some super shady activity. She and Foggy have always been at odds because she sees him as the way too stiff establishment type, and he sees her as the rebel who thinks that she's above the law. In the end, she and Daredevil had a bit of a thing at a time when Daredevil was pretty much wanted by every woman who appeared in his comic, including Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. Oh, and after years of being friends with Foggy, Matt didn't even know that he had a sister till we got past the 100th issue of Daredevil, which is pretty weird. It's also implied later on that she is way too young for Matt. Also, her face is something else in that whole issue where that comes up. She's like, I missed you. And I'm like, what's going on? You look crazy, Candace. Number 9. Elektra. While Elektra may be one of Daredevil's greatest loves, it doesn't mean she can't be one of the strangest as well. It all boils down to the fact that Elektra is a really intense anti-hero when she's not busy being a villain. She's an assassin who has zero qualms with killing anyone in her way, which makes those two a kind of strange match. However, their costumes match really well, which is likely meant to symbolize some of the similarities that these two have. They are both intensely skilled fighters with a lot of darkness in their past and their present, to be honest. her present. Well, yeah, because Elektra did come back to life, so it did happen. She has a present, even though she did. However, Elektra kind of paved the way for all the death and destruction, it seems, that dating Daredevil seems to bring to most of his partners. So there's also that. Number 8. Becky Blake. This is a pretty weird one, mostly just because it seems like Becky Blake and Matt's relationship is a very one-sided and has always remained that way, and yet Becky never gives up. But also because Becky is another character who has just suffered a lot of trauma and tragedy, some of which was caused by Matt Murdock himself, and some of which was not. While many people might know Karen Page as the sole secretary for Nelson and Murdock, after there was Karen, there was Becky. Becky herself lost the use of her legs after suffering an attack by Michael Reese, who Murdock would later bring to justice. Becky would consistently express her feelings for Matt, who seemed conflicted before deciding he wasn't interested. Maybe it was his relationship with Karen, which was also a huge mess, that ultimately affected his decision. Either way, Karen remained a friend to Matt for a long time despite all the crazy stuff he put her through. In fact, she even also became a lawyer and joined their firm for a while. Eventually, however, she chose to firmly distance herself from both Matt and Foggy after having a near-death experience and felt that Matt Murdock was no longer worthy of her trust. And she was like desperate for him for so long, and I'm just like, wow, that one thing though, she's like, and that's it. I was super into you, but I can't anymore. Number 7. Moondragon. Yeah, this was a weird one. A brief one, but a weird one. Daredevil and Moondragon had a brief infatuation with one another in Daredevil issue 108. After he leaves Natasha, Black Widow, who also has the hots for him, she mourns the loss of Matt, knowing that he has eyes for Moondragon. What? Okay, so even if we ignore the fact that Moondragon is usually presented later as being a gay character in the comics, this is still a really weird ship. The two are described as being inexplicably drawn to one another, but ultimately decide to go their separate ways because they are galaxies apart. Well, literally. I also love that Moondragon originally explains that they can't be together because of their respective orientations toward life in the cosmos. Apparently. They also, I believe, one time like psychically mind melded, which is pretty sexy for Moondragon, I think. She's like, let me get into that beautiful, brilliant mind. Number 6. Dakota North. I mean, this one made sense in terms of how it kind of came about, and it wasn't a full-on romance specifically, but these two did hook up. It all went down after Matt had suffered a pretty big loss and was still technically married. After the hookup, the not so great part was that pictures of these two doing the deed were circulated, because Kingpin is obsessed in every way possible you can imagine with Daredevil. They ended up on the front page of all the newspapers, which was super awkward for both Dakota and Matt, and also for a time cost Dakota North pretty unfairly, if I might add, her reputation. Matt came out mostly unscathed though in comparison, although there was definitely a cost for him as well when it came to these pictures. The images made everything super weird between the two going forward. And kind of awkward for I think a lot of people in that comic. There were a lot of people that were like, what's happening? Number 5. Karen Page. Karen Page has to have one of the most tragic stories out of all of Daredevil's love interests. One of, anyways, because as I said earlier, there's a lot of tragedy here. Karen and Matt had an on and off again romance that eventually resulted in Karen's death at the hands of Bullseye. Surprise, surprise. Karen betrayed Matt by selling out his secret identity due to a drug addiction. However, she did return to warn him afterward. In the end, Matt and Karen came back together despite the revelation that she had been the one to sell out his secret identity in this case and had betrayed him. She got clean and the two of them got back together. They would later break up again and get back together a few more times, with Karen even forgiving Daredevil for faking his death and helping him when he had a crisis where split personalities appeared to emerge. Which kind of makes sense given his dating history, but we'll get to that later. They had the most rocky romance likely in comic book history overall, and Karen actually gave her life to save Daredevil. But also she went through some crazy stuff, I feel like, because of Daredevil. Poor Karen Page, RIP. Number 4. Milla Donovan. There are fates worse than death, and that seems to be what Milla Donovan got when it comes to her relationship with Daredevil. She was driven insane by Mr. Fear, who had been targeting her for months and posing as her therapist after she ended up marrying Matt Murdock. She was driven insane, killed someone as a result, and ended up being locked away for her own good when private care also wasn't working for her. In the end, her husband Matt was denied visitation rights while Milla was in treatment, as it was believed that he was actually the cause of all of her problems. Yikes. Her parents attempted to get custody of MILLA again after they learned of everything that had happened to their daughter and blamed Matt, which is, it's kind of fair, to be honest. In the end, Matt agreed to their request after pictures of him sleeping with Dakota North surfaced. Overall, he was just going through a lot and he needed a shoulder to cry on, which ended up turning into a weird relationship with Dakota, which we talked about earlier. Matt had been attempting to lobby to get MILLA freed from the mental institution, but in the end, he acknowledged that he just needed to let her go. Bullseye did attempt to kill her when she was made one of his targets, but fortunately, Daredevil had already predicted this play and had Black Widow on standby to protect MILLA. All in all, this relationship became all kinds of messed up, and I'm still amazed that MILLA is alive today. And before we move on to our number 3 spot, just a quick little reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you can, if you will. It really does help us out here at the channel, and thank you for doing so. Number 3, Heather Glenn. Heather Glenn is another weird partner for Daredevil in that her story was also deeply tragic. I guess this is becoming no longer weird since everybody's story is deeply tragic. She was a beneficiary of his, a wealthy socialite that he ended up dating. In his Daredevil guise, he ended up saving her father from Purple Man, Kilgrave, who had been controlling him. However, her father was so distraught when he found out all that the Purple Man had made him do that he still took his own life while he was in prison. In the end, his daughter would follow suit. She blamed Daredevil for her father's death and attempted to betray his secret identity multiple times to get back at him. Still, somehow, Matt got past that and Heather got past her own hatred of DD, and the two ended up engaged. In the end, however, Heather took her own life, hanging herself after she became distraught when criminals destroyed her business, which, of course, she also blamed Daredevil for, and which he once again may have deserved that blame. Maybe. Number 2, Black Cat. This is a pretty random one. Black Cat isn't someone you'd associate with Daredevil, mostly because she is usually so obsessed with Spider-Man that everyone she has ever been with outside of Peter Parker tends to have to do with some kind of play of getting back at him or something to do with Peter himself. For Black Cat, it's usually all about Spider-Man. So, how did this come about? Well, it all went down when Spider-Man recruited Daredevil to help him free Black Cat from prison. But while they were developing a legal strategy, Black Cat herself escaped and the two of them had to track her down. It was during this time that Daredevil developed an attraction to Black Cat and she to him. Although for Black Cat, there still really only seems to be one true superhero for her, as both she and Daredevil admitted that their relationship was more of a fun physical thing than anything serious. Although I guess I'm not super surprised that they're attracted to each other because they're both like hotties, but I'm also just like, this is like a random thing that someone was like, what if they got together? Everyone's like, I guess why not? Number 1, Typhoid Mary. Typhoid Mary has got to be one of the strangest pairings for Matt, especially considering he was the one that caused all the grief in her life after he knocked her out of a window. True story. This trauma brought forth from Mary 3 split personalities, at least 3, which are later kind of explained as being part of past trauma, but were kind of just triggered into resurfacing by Matt's accidental influence. By his accidental violence, really. Still, you can pretty much blame Matt for creating the villain that became Typhoid Mary. One of these personalities was that villain, another was hypersexual, and the third was much more modest in comparison to the other two. I guess the most normal of all 3 personalities, really. These are the most commonly acknowledged personalities, but she also appears to have other lesser utilized personalities when it comes to the comics, such as Mutant Zero. Daredevil for a time was involved with all 3 of her main personalities, but it gets weirder. A frequent ally of the Kingpin, Mary has also attempted to kill Matt multiple times. Oh, and while she is a mutant, she only seems to be able to access her mutant abilities through certain personalities. Weird.